You know, history is so often taught to us as this series of totally inevitable events. We're told about massive forces colliding and great empires rising and falling like they're just following some grand pre-written script. But is that really how it happens? Welcome to Chronicles of Humanity. I'm your host, and in today's cinematic explainer, we're going to unpack one of the most chilling historical thrillers of the 20th century. We're zooming in on the hidden moments, the split-second human decisions, and the absolute unbelievable coincidences that literally tore the modern world apart. So think about this for a second. It's the ultimate central mystery. Could one wrong turn, like a simple everyday driving mistake, really change the course of human history? Could a basic misunderstanding over street directions ignite a global catastrophe? As we journey through the evidence today, we're going to completely strip away that whole inevitability of the history books. We are going to watch the events of June 1914 unfold in real time. And honestly, you'll see just how terrifyingly close the world came to a totally different future. Section 1. A world on the brink. Okay, so to really grasp the gravity of that fateful wrong turn, we first need to look at the incredibly unstable geopolitical landscape of Europe at the time. The whole continent was essentially a powder keg, with European powers grinding against each other like tectonic plates. On one side, you have the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary, which was this expanding empire strongly backed by Germany. Now, in 1908, Austria-Hungary had annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina, a region that used to be controlled by the Ottoman Empire. And on the other side, you have neighboring Serbia, along with fierce Serbian nationalists who desperately wanted to incorporate that very same large Slavic population into a unified pan-Slavic empire, and they had the powerful backing of Russia. So when Austria-Hungary decided to hold military exercises in the Bosnian capital of Sarajevo and send the heir to the throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, to oversee them, well, this was a deliberate show of force, a very clear warning to Serbia.
But here's the thing. The timing absolutely could not have been worse. The date of this royal visit was June 28th. To the Austro-Hungarians, sure, it was probably just another date on a calendar. But to Serbia, June 28th was St. Vitus's Day. This was the highly sacred anniversary of the Serbian defeat in Kosovo by Ottoman forces all the way back in 1389. To Serbian nationalists, the idea of parading this foreign conqueror through the streets of Sarajevo on this specific, emotionally charged day, it was seen as a completely unforgivable insult. Section 2. The June 28 plot.
Now, let's step into the tense true crime reality of that morning. Despite multiple warnings of possible terrorist attacks, official security precautions were shockingly light. The Archduke and his wife, Sophie, were traveling in an open car. And get this, the motorcad's exact route had been published in the papers well in advance. Waiting along that route were some extreme, yet kind of amateurish preparations. 7 Bosnian Serb members of the separatist group Young Bosnia, acting with help from a shadowy ultra-nationalist group called the Black Hand, had positioned themselves along the Apelquay. That's a major street right in the center of Sarajevo. These conspirators were scarcely more than boys, really. But they were armed with explosives, loaded revolvers, and vials of cyanide so they could take their own lives rather than face capture. As the motorcade rolled down the street, the plan was put into motion, but it almost immediately descended into total chaos. A conspirator named Nedeljko Čabrnović actually threw a bomb toward the Archduke's open car, but the driver saw it coming and floored it. The bomb bounced right off the back of the royal vehicle and exploded under the car behind them. It injured several people, including the adjutant to the governor of Bosnia. But Franz Ferdinand? He survived. What followed next is almost hard to believe. It was a tragicomic string of errors. Believing he had succeeded, or maybe just totally panicking, Čabrnović swallowed his cyanide pill and threw himself into the nearby river to ensure his death. But the cyanide was expired. It didn't kill him, it just made him violently ill. And the river? Because of the summer heat, it was only a few inches deep, far, far too shallow to drown in. He was quickly dragged out of the mud and arrested. The assassination attempt had officially failed. So you really have to ask yourself, why didn't the Archduke just cancel the rest of the visit right then and there? Well, arriving at City Hall, Franz Ferdinand was absolutely furious. He actually interrupted the mayor's prepared welcome speech, shouting, "I come here as your guest and your people greet me with bombs." Members of his entourage practically begged him to call off the rest of the day. But Franz Ferdinand was an irritable, deeply stubborn guy. He hated being told what to do, and he flat out refused to hide. Section 3. The fateful wrong turn.
This is where a disastrous communication breakdown literally sealed their fate. After his speech at City Hall, the Archduke demanded to visit the injured officers in the hospital. For security reasons, officials completely changed the itinerary on the fly. They decided the motorcade should speed straight down the Appelquai, completely avoiding the narrow, crowded streets of the Bazaar district. But there was a fatal flaw. The officials discussed this sudden route change in German. The drivers of the first and second cars, they were Czech, and no one bothered to translate the new directions for them. So the first car confidently turned off the safe route and onto Franz Joseph Street. The Archduke's car obediently followed right behind it. The governor, who was riding with the Archduke, suddenly realized the mistake and screamed at the driver to stop. The driver slammed on the brakes, the heavy car shuddered, stopped, and the engine stalled, right in front of a general store. And guess who just happened to be standing under the awning of that exact general store? Gavrilo Princip. He was a 19-year-old student, the son of a farmer. In fact, he'd previously been rejected as a Serb guerrilla for being too small and too weak. He was one of the original 7 assassins from earlier that morning, but after the first bombing failed, the motorcade had just sped right past him. His chance was gone. Now, there's a popular myth that he was standing there eating a sandwich when the car pulled up, but actually, scratch that, that's purely fiction. The reality is far more chilling. By pure, unadulterated coincidence, the Archduke's car had taken a wrong turn and physically stalled less than 5 feet away from the one teenager who still had a loaded revolver in his pocket. Presented with this impossible historic opportunity, Princip stepped forward. As historians have noted, if Princip had spent his entire life studying human anatomy, he could not have placed his shots any better. He fired twice at point-blank range. One bullet struck Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The other struck his wife, Sophie. Both shots were lethal. Just like that, the royal couple was dead. Section 4. The Global Domino Effect. So what happened to the assassin? Well, because Gavrilo Princip was under 20 years old, Austro-Hungarian law actually spared him the death penalty. Instead, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He would never see a free world again, eventually dying in 1918 from tuberculosis in Theresienstadt, which is a prison that, decades later, would cruelly be repurposed by the Nazis as a concentration camp. But the dark forces Princip unleashed that day in Sarajevo, they would far outlive him. On July 28, 1914, exactly 1 month later to the day, Austria-Hungary officially declared war on Serbia. This was the spark that finally ignited the powder keg. Because of that complex web of alliances we examined earlier, the machine just kicked into gear. Germany stepped in to back Austria-Hungary. Russia mobilized its massive army to protect Serbia. France and Britain were rapidly pulled into the fray. The dominoes fell with terrifying speed. And that unstoppable chain reaction brings us to a staggering, haunting number: 17 million. That is the estimated number of dead soldiers and civilians in the resulting conflict, World War I. 4 agonizing years of horrific, mechanized trench warfare. Entire empires collapsed, global borders were entirely redrawn, and a whole generation was lost. All of it tracing back to a mistranslation, a stalled engine, and 2 gunshots. Section 5. Chance, Forces, and History. So, what does this all mean for us today? Are we entirely at the mercy of coincidence, or was the world in 1914 already destined to burn? Well, yes. Europe was this fragile web of militarism and secret alliances. The tension was absolutely real, the nationalistic forces were immense, and perhaps, in the grand scheme, war was inevitable. But remember this: history is never just about broad forces. It is fundamentally about people. If an irritable Archduke had just canceled a tour, if a translator had just spoken up, if a Czech driver hadn't turned the steering wheel down Franz Joseph Street, perhaps the fuse would never have reached the powder. Human history, as we've seen today, is ultimately shaped by the terrifying collision of long-term global forces and split-second human mistakes. Keep questioning the past, and I'll see you in the next explainer.